Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 91, the podcast where we talk about photography, videography, and anything that's got anything to do with any of that with me, Kirsten Nuts, and Nick Kirby. Now, it's episode 91.
It is. What does that mean?
It's only 9 away from the biggest party you could possibly imagine. Although, having said that, how's your party mood at the moment?
I'm not very party-esque. No. Is that right? Sorry, I don't know what the word right.
And why's that?
Because I've had COVID all week.
Way!
Yay!
Excellent.
Fun times.
Fun times.
Yeah. Better now. Still feel a bit rough, but nothing outrageous. Still got a little bit of a cough, but I'm all clear.
Yeah.
Which is obviously why we're in the same room.
Exactly. So, it's finally hit you.
Yeah. I blame you. Somehow you gave it to me.
I had COVID like in, when did I have it? November or something?
Exactly.
December? November, something like that, yeah.
You've got 5G on your phone.
I don't, well, it should be like after all my vaccinations and the fact that I had COVID, it should be 6G by now.
But it's funny though, because I didn't catch COVID before, but as soon as I got my new phone, which does 5G.
There you go.
There it is.
That's got to be
proof. Right there, proof.
Uncanny. But like, how's it affected you?
It hasn't really. I had a bit of a deep cough, dry cough, and had a stinking headache for a couple of days, and then
Really?
that eased off. Other than that, I felt just run down, like a bad cold.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, like a bad cold. But otherwise, all good.
Yeah, it's really interesting how it affects different people differently. You know, I remember, when we had it, because it was myself, my wife, and my sister-in-law, and my stepson. We all had it at the same time, and all four of us experienced different symptoms. You know, and it was a different thing. From like my stepson had 0 symptoms to me just feeling a bit under the weather, basically, to my wife nearly ending up in an ambulance. You know, so
that's right. Yeah, I remember.
So it was, there's a full range there.
Yeah. I didn't have any loss of taste or smell or anything like that. All fine.
Yeah, neither did I. And yet my wife did. And she still hasn't recovered from that.
I was reading something this morning that they don't know why it affects some and not others, but they're fairly, it sounds like they're fairly confident it's genetics, and that there's a particular something or other in your nose which can get affected when your cells get affected with COVID, and some people's get affected and some people's just don't. It's something. Is
that like why some people love Marmite and others hate it? And there's no, because that apparently,
and why some people see a gold dress and some people see a blue dress. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I do. And I can't remember. I think I saw it both ways at one point.
It's gold.
But you know, the Marmite thing actually has something to do with taste receptors in your mouth. That is genetic. So some people have, and I don't know which way around it worked, but it's like either, those people who have this particular receptor like Marmite, or they hate it. I'm not sure which is which, but
well, I hate it.
I can't stand stuff.
But I do like Twiglets.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Go figure.
I mean, I always say, like, if my wife wants to avoid me kissing her, all she's got to do is eat some Marmite. That's because that isn't going to happen.
Oh dear.
Yeah, Marmite is like that. I don't know why that was invented. That never needed to happen.
No,
yeah.
no,
it's just if I could only turn back time, that song.
Could turn back time.
Some people wonder, like, what would happen if I went back in time and I killed my grandfather? Like, would I even exist? And then therefore, could I travel back in time? That conundrum. I'm just wondering if I could travel back in time and kill the inventor of Marmite before he had a chance to invent it.
Wow.
That's my evil genius mind thinking.
Well, episode 91 goes to a dark place. Okay.
Very dark. Well, so you've literally spent the whole week inside.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. It's been, and funnily enough, the same day I tested positive, the very next morning after I tested positive, friend of mine texted me who lives miles and miles away from here, said, "Oh yeah, just tested positive."
Oh.
All his family are as well.
Really? Oh, shit.
Yeah. So he's quite hopeful that, because I'm clear now.
Yeah.
That actually in the next day or so he'll be clear too. But yeah, I've been stuck indoors. You don't realize. I don't think I would have gone many places because I've actually had a lot of stuff to do at home. But it's that restriction of saying you cannot go.
Yeah,
that is just so frustrating. I didn't need to go.
Yeah.
But knowing that I couldn't was just horrible.
Well, that was not too dissimilar to the first lockdown, I remember.
Right.
You know, where it wasn't like, well, the weather was great. You remember? Like that summer was awesome. Well, that spring was awesome. And I thought, like, I don't want to go anywhere. Just because they're telling me I can. Now I'm pissed off.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So my mum lives around the corner. So she was dropping me off food shopping and whatnot at the door.
Right.
And, yeah, because it hit when I hadn't been food shopping as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah. Absolutely nothing in. Anyway, all good now.
Yeah, we had the same thing. You know, we're deliveries, and and like my mother-in-law came by and dropped stuff off.
Yeah,
you know, and then it's just this weird thing. You know, she would knock on the door, and then I would open the door, and she dropped all the bags and whatever food just right in front of the front door. But then she'd be like 10 meters away, just waving. You'd be like,
God, it's just depressing.
I don't know. I feel like some weird leper now or something.
I know, of course. Do you know what film I watched a week and a half ago?
Contagion.
Was it called that? No, was it called Contagion or was it called Outbreak?
They're two different movies, yeah.
Oh, they are two different.
So Outbreak's the one with Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah, that's the one I watched.
Outbreak.
I watched that like a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago now.
Right.
That's why I got it.
I tell you what you want to watch. There's it's like a 70s movie called The Andromeda Strain. It's based on a book by Michael Crichton, who wrote Jurassic Park, right? And I can't remember whether that was like the first one of his novels that was turned into a movie or not, but it's always been one of my favorite kind of 70s movies. Possibly the first movie I ever bought when iTunes first came out.
Oh wow!
You know,
must have taken a week.
But well, I probably did. Back in the days, we'd get up in the morning. You're like, "Oh, I'm going to set a download so we can watch something tonight."
I want to watch something next week. A week on Friday.
Yeah. But that's an interesting thing. That's about a virus that I think it's a virus that escapes from a lab or something. And then people die because the blood basically hardens inside of their bodies.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I know. Excellent.
Sludge.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen that, highly recommend it. It's a bit 70s, you know. It's like Yul Brynner's, what is it called? Future World or something.
Oh, God. I don't think I ever watched that.
Yeah. It's
What's all that?
You know what makes me laugh is when you watch movies like that, like sci-fi movies from the 60s and 70s, and usually what happens, or even the early 80s, like Terminator, was like, you know, the future, 1999. And you kind of go, yeah, that never happened. You know, it's hilarious how they imagined the future to be, you know, only like 30, 40 years ahead of time, you know?
Yeah.
And you kind of go, well, none of these things came to pass. Like, we're not using, you know, rocket backpacks.
Where's my hoverboard?
Exactly.
Where are my power laces?
Exactly. That never happened.
They made those.
They did.
Yeah.
They're ridiculously expensive, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, well, you might as well just have Velcro.
Or a time machine. I mean, that's a funny thing, though. I mean, there's one way that you can prove that time machines just aren't possible. And it's the fact that there are no time travelers around.
That you know of.
That you know of course. Of course. Sometimes you see these, you get these pictures on these, you know, photographs on like Facebook or whatever. And it's like, you know, ooh, this guy. And then you see like a college book photo from like 1992, and you see the same guy apparently show up in a photograph, like a First World War photo in the trenches. That's definitely the same guy.
Definitely.
Let's
make a deal. If either of us invent time travel or meet someone who is a time traveler,
right,
we come back to this exact moment now.
And you'll walk through the door there.
No, well, that's very disappointing.
Basically, that theory disproven.
Right disappointing.
There. So you can say with absolute certainty that you will never invent a time machine. That's it now. Okay.
Or I'm just messing with myself.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Anyway,
so what have we got today? Now, there's a whole bunch of interesting stories that have sort of come out over the last week or something. One is there's a new law in England and Wales that makes it illegal to photograph breastfeeding women in public.
You have to question why it was legal prior to that. I know I'm being slightly facetious, but
yeah, I mean,
it all falls into that privacy and where you are, but it makes sense.
Yeah, because the thing is, I think, there is an argument.
Who's doing that anyway?
And that's the point. I mean, who would do that, right? I mean, there's certain things you just wouldn't photograph. I mean, why would you?
No, I mean, if you're out doing like street or something like that, you're actually a photographer. You're doing some street. You'd probably just let it go. You just go, no, all right, we'll just wait for them to finish or shoot something else.
Yeah, I mean, there is this argument, and of course we've discussed it on a podcast before, and I hear it all the time, like in sort of camera club environments and whatever, because there are quite a lot of people who like shooting street photography. But there's this argument that, the law says if you're in a public place, then you have no, reasonable expectation of privacy because you are yourself in a public place. So, what that means is that if you're out in the street and the photographer is out in the street, basically that photographer then has the right to shoot whatever they want, right? Because if you make the decision to be out in a public place, then you can't really have reasonable expectation of privacy. I understand all that, and I agree with that to a degree. There's this added thing whereby, in the UK at least, if you're a photographer and you stand you're on a sidewalk somewhere on a public road, and you have a long lens and you point that at somebody's living room window or bedroom window, and you photograph whatever's going on inside of a house because you are in a public place, you're now legally perfectly fine to do that. And that's the thing where I'm thinking, well, I don't really think that's cool.
Yeah.
Because the people that are in their house, surely they should have, a reasonable expectation of privacy.
Absolutely.
Even if they haven't got a curtains drawn.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that falls a bit flat. People argue about this left, right, and center, and it's, whatever. But I think, and then of course there's this other argument where, like, let's say you have, kids playing in a playground. There's some, creepy dude standing by the side of the playground, photographing the kids playing there. If you were a parent, well, I am a parent, and if somebody started photographing,
I'd have that camera off him right away.
Yeah, if somebody started photographing my kid, I'd be over there.
That would be in pieces. Yeah.
So and then you can argue, well, but he's legally perfectly within his rights.
Now,
screw that.
Now, there's an argument to say actually there are photos with, if a woman is out doing that, there are photos where actually there is an artistic side to taking a photo like that with, assuming it's tasteful. No, listen.
No, I've just remembered something. This just popped up in my head. I was watching Ricky Gervais' Afterlife yesterday.
I don't get on with that series at all.
Oh my God. There's one joke in there. Like, why does the little kid fall off the swing?
Go on.
Does it have any arms?
Oh God.
I mean, what can I say? I didn't write that joke.
Wow. Brilliant. That's a very Ricky Gervais joke, isn't it?
What's the difference between a Rolls Royce and a dead prostitute? I don't have a Rolls Royce in my garage.
Oh, jeez.
What can I say? Afterlife, available on Netflix.
That's a very Ricky Gervais joke. Oh, my God.
Anyway, back to photographing children in the playground.
Wow. Should we cut here or no? Just, wow.
Anyway,
no, you said it. It's staying.
No, man. Like I said, I blame Ricky.
No, but if a woman is out doing that, there's an argument to say there's an artistic photo in there somewhere, all right? Assuming it's done tastefully and done right. Right. There is that side to it, and you can imagine the type of photo that could probably be. But as a photographer, particularly when it's someone in that, let's say I appreciate it's out in public, but in a vulnerable position, you go and talk to them. You go and ask.
Well, okay.
This is where all of this stuff should come back to. Now, you're out taking photos on the street. You can't be asking permission for every single person. Now, if someone doesn't like it, just get rid of the photo. If they have a problem with it, fine. But when it's clearly someone that it's a contentious photo that you might take, go and talk to them.
And it always boils down to consent, ultimately.
That's it.
That's the thing.
It's not complicated. It's not difficult to do. And all right, perhaps that particular situation, they may go, no, I'm not okay with that. All right. Some will go, yeah, go on.
I mean, it does come across as a little bit pervy if you get some dude with the lens. I mean, this is actually how this whole thing came about, because there was a Manchester-based designer called Julia Cooper, and she was basically photographed by some dude while she was breastfeeding her baby, and which creeped her out. So she then started this whole campaign, which has now turned into, I think it's a bill. So I don't think it's actually been passed yet.
Not passed yet.
But I mean, it sounds like it's 99.9% sure that it will be passed. So so that's a change.
I have no great strong feelings either way.
I mean, one thing I would say is that some people may argue that this is sort of a slippery slope, and
it could be.
Today we can't photograph women breastfeeding, and tomorrow we can't photograph anybody out in the street. I actually personally, I don't think that's a sensible argument at all. I just think, do the decent thing and don't photograph people breastfeeding their babies without talking to them first, or even like, why would you even? I mean, it's, unless it's something, I mean, maybe somebody's doing a series of.
You don't know. There could be. There are. I'm sure there are some legitimate reasons for taking a photo like that.
Yeah.
But not without them knowing.
Yeah.
That's creepy, people.
So, I mean, that sort of almost like leads into another, new legal thing that's about to happen in the UK, and it's part of they're putting something through called the Digitally Altered Body Image Bill, which will potentially lead to influencers and broadcasters and and publishers and so on having to basically show a warning on any edited portrait. So as soon as there's a portrait photo,
this could get interesting,
that's being retouched or edited, especially if
what does edited mean?
Well, I think they're defining it. I think they're defining it as like where proportions have been changed. So, for instance, if somebody's made legs longer, neck longer, the typical kind of
or where they mess up, extra fingers.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah.
I mean, the typical kind of fashion photography kind of retouch thing. I mean, it's not unusual to make legs thinner or change shape for hips and and arms and the neck and whatever else. I mean, that's not unusual to change proportions like that. But apparently, from now or from very soon, these kind of images will have to feature some kind of disclaimer, logo type of thing.
I don't disagree with it. If it's editing to that, I use this word carefully, but extreme, where it's one thing smoothing skin and doing all of that. It's a different level.
Putting an Instagram filter on it.
Yeah. It is a different level, making that photo look thinner, looking,
What are you saying these fluffy dog ears aren't real?
Are they not?
I don't know. I mean, it's like, you're going to have to, I mean, there has to be some kind of definition as to what that actually means, because otherwise, I mean, virtually, you could say like any raw image that's been color corrected is therefore edited. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Obviously. But I can see it. I mean, we went through this whole body image thing with our oldest daughter in secondary school. And there was quite an interesting process, because there had some talks at the school, some presentations that we attended. And one of these was really interesting. They had this FBI artist, which it was a film that I showed, but basically there was this FBI artist whose job it was to draw suspects, right? And so they had a group of people, and these people would go in, and they would sit behind a screen, and they would describe themselves, and the FBI artist would draw them based on their descriptions. You hadn't seen them at all. And then they would basically pair these people up, the subjects, and they would put them in a room together for like half an hour or something. They would have a chat, and then it would come back, and then it would basically describe the other person that they've been chatting with. And though the FBI artist, again, would draw that person based on the description. And then they would compare the two images, one which was the self-description and how people saw themselves. And then they would compare that with the other drawing, which was based on the description of somebody else and how they see, the other person, if that makes sense. So, and it's really interesting how those images differed, like how somebody's perception of themselves is very different from the way that they're perceived by other people. So, one of the things was, for instance, if you're unhappy with your nose, for example, you would draw attention to your nose and you would like describe it in an unflattering way. Like you'd say like, oh, my nose is like potato and it's too big or something like that, right? When somebody else might actually have completely different descriptive terms for, for your nose or your eyes or whatever it may be. And so that was basically to show that, the way you see yourself, especially when you're a teenager, the body image that you have of yourself actually may vary dramatically from the way that other people actually view you. And that, that's a really important realization.
And that's the same that's the same as you, even as you get older, you just become less and less, I don't know, concerned with it, or, you just
give up, basically.
That's pretty much it, isn't it? I think that's where I'm going with that. Yeah.
So I gave up a long time ago.
Yeah. But, I don't disagree with it. I don't entirely see how they're going to enforce it. But I don't disagree with it. It's...
Yeah, I mean, I think...
It'll be quite telling if it does come in.
Yeah.
As to how many images that's on. Every single image in any magazine.
I mean, it seems...
They'll just put a disclaimer at the start of the magazine saying every single photo in here is...
Yeah, it could be. I mean, to me, it was hilarious when we went to this Photoshop talk, at my daughter's secondary school, because literally this whole evening was about like body image and digitally altered imagy and and all the rest of it. That literally spent all day retouching images.
Excellent.
That day. So I was sitting there going, I feel guilty now.
Yeah.
But
as you should.
Yeah, but I think it's true to say that especially if you're a photographer or if you're if you're a retoucher something, to me it's blatantly obvious that virtually everything we see in the commercial world is retouched to some degree, because very often there are extremely good reasons as to why it has to be, and so when I look at a billboard or I look at like imagery, and when I went to a drugstore the other day with my wife, and she's picking out some makeup, and I was looking at the the fashion photography in there. It's blatantly obvious what's retouched and what isn't. I mean, nobody's got super stellar, clear, like lizard-like skin,
but it's not obvious to most people.
But it's not obvious to most people, and so they and then you have this thing with like, especially with teenagers. I mean, I would say teenage girls, but I think it's probably also true for guys.
I think it's definitely true for guys.
In a slightly different way, maybe. But is it all of a sudden you think like this is the thing you have to aspire to, and then therefore,
the only way to really kind of start kids understanding that really is the case is for a whole bunch of photographers to get out there and show this is what it actually looked like, and this is what it looks like after.
Yeah. Well,
whether that's commercial work that they've done, they probably wouldn't be able to do that. But they could go and take a load of new photos of people and go, this is what I would do on a typical retouch if this was going into a magazine.
Oh, yeah, for
sure. And this is how it looks before and after. So they understand, actually, this is everything you're seeing is false.
Well, also, I mean, it is false.
It's false to the extent that it's not the actual reality. However, a lot of the times it's what that person could look like at their best.
Well, this is how I always describe it when it comes to just headshots, for example. It's somebody might be coming for a headshot session. They might have had like a terrible day. They may have like gotten out of bed on the wrong side and like slipped on a banana peel. It might have been raining. Like whatever. And they've shut the door, forgotten the keys inside, and all like that. Like a really terrible day. And then they walk up for their session. And it's really my job to make them look like they're doing their best day.
Yeah.
Not so that they look like a cartoon character, obviously, but, to really just, take back all those things that make you believe they've actually had a really good night's sleep that night and there's no bags under their eyes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's what a headshot is. It's it's ultimately a promotional image, whether that's, whether that's for somebody using that headshot on their own website or on social media, they're using that to basically represent themselves on a good day. And of course, when it comes to acting, it's I would say it's slightly different because with actors' headshots, you got to be careful that you don't go overboard because the casting director still wants to see what they actually look like.
Yeah.
But that being said. Yeah. I think the retouching is just different on that. It's not that there's less retouching; it's just different. A good example there is like if somebody's got like a case of the pimple or something, or some mild acne or something, you can take that out because that stuff isn't going to be there in 2 weeks from now.
That's it. Exactly right.
So I don't really see, there's nothing inherently wrong with retouching at all.
No, there's a very fine line, isn't there, between what's the right thing to do and what's just potentially too much. Take fashion out of it for a minute because that's just a whole other world completely. Yeah. But if the way I kind of think about it is that kind of 2 week rule, so to speak, is a really good one. If something on that person is not going to be there in a couple of weeks' time or a month's time or whatever that time frame is, get rid of it.
There can be, you can have conversations, and that does happen. Where you have a client, and they say like, oh, I've got this scar on my chin or something, and I've really been super self-conscious about it, and I was wondering whether you could take it out. If that's on request, then that's perfectly cool because ultimately...
How would you counter that? Because I'm going to assume that you're more on the side of that should stay, but how would you counter that argument to them? I think there's one thing, reducing it, maybe a touch, so it's perhaps slightly less obvious, so they feel a bit more happy. But at the end of the day, that's you. Yeah,
we'd have a conversation about it. Again, if it's like an acting headshot, it has to stay in.
Yeah,
because you cannot, you can't.
Imagine Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, or Harrison Ford, or like people who have scars on their faces, or even even Mark Hamill had a facial scar after. I think it was between the original Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. He had a motorcycle accident or car accident or something like that. Yeah. Mm. That's why he ended up in a bantha tank at the beginning of The Empire Strikes Back. Because they had to account for his facial disfigurement, so to say.
Gotcha.
So
I hadn't realized that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I think that's why that scene exists.
Yeah, that's cool.
But it's really, it's a conversation that you have, and but ultimately, of course, the client has to be happy with what they're getting, and if they don't, if they see themselves without that scar, then that's perfectly fine with me. Because it is something you have to feel good about, and I'm not responsible for what they're using their imagery afterwards.
Well, that's true as well. That is true. Ultimately, they're the only one that matters, but.
I had a client last year at some point, and she had her eyes weren't exactly the same size. And I'll be honest with you, if you saw her, you wouldn't notice. You'd have to really look hard.
Well, this is the other thing, right? Is if you were to meet someone, how would you go away remembering that person? That's also what that portrait, or headshot should actually
the one with
look
the
like.
wonky eyes.
Yeah, but you wouldn't, unless it was obvious. You saw it. You're going to see that person. You're not going to remember that they didn't have perfectly smooth skin on their forehead or their cheeks or whatever. You're not going to remember that. You're going to remember the face. So there's an argument to say, all right, you can get rid of some of that. You're not going to remember that volcano spot that they've got over here. Well, you might if it's that big. Then get rid of it. You may or may not notice there a scar that they've got or something like that. Perhaps reduce the intensity of it, if you like.
Yeah, and you would do that anyway. And
Sorry.
you know,
Yeah, hopping away.
Mr. COVID, okay?
Oh, dear. Yeah, that's how I kind of think of it. Is if you met that person, how would you go away remembering them?
Yeah. Yeah, and, in this... I mean, ultimately, I'm just a tool that they use,
You are a tool.
I am a tool. Total tool. So, I mean, it's also important to understand that, most clients in that regard don't really know what retouching even actually means.
No, of course not.
I'm working on a job at the moment, actually, that requires quite a lot of retouching. And that's, there's a number of reasons for that. This is a tricky lighting situation, blah, 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 and all the rest of it. So it does require quite a bit of work. And that's fine. But the resulting images look perfectly natural, and it's definitely an enhancement. It just gets rid of some of the things that we're just unable to control, at the time. So that's that. But yeah. So that's an interesting thing. It's called the Digitally Altered Body Image Bill. It's proposed by Conservative MP, of course.
Of course.
Luke Evans, I think. I don't even know what area he's from or something. No idea. But you got to remember, I mean, this is the thing that shocked me the most, actually, especially when we went through this with my daughter. There are 1.25 million people in the UK that struggle with eating disorders. That's a lot of people.
I'm surprised it's as low as that, if I'm honest.
Really?
I'd have thought it'd be higher. It's one of those that you never know that someone's got an issue. For half of them, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm surprised it's as low as that.
I mean, I've recently learned that people in my immediate family have eating disorders that I'd never thought they would. Yeah,
I've known people. This is like people. I've known people. That 1.5 million, 1.25 million, whatever you just said, just seems low.
My only eating disorder is the fact that I like McDonald's way too much.
Yeah, that's because you're an animal.
I'm an animal. Yeah.
What are you doing for lunch?
I thought you'd never mention it. Anyway, so yeah, if you want to meet us live in the flash, check out the Windsor McDonald's. That's where we typically hang out.
Yeah, outside.
That's right, outside.
On the railings
at the moment. Yeah. Yeah. So that's. I mean, anyway, interesting thing. That's going to happen here in the UK. Again, it's a bill most likely going to become law. I would have guessed.
Yeah.
Very good thing. What else is new? Here's a fun story. There's a new Leica M11 out.
$1 billion.
So, yeah, the new Leica M11 looks cool. I saw some pictures of it. It looks cool. I mean, it looks like a Leica, It's a 60 megapixel rangefinder. Okay, if I get this right, it's a 60 megapixel rangefinder with triple resolution tech. And I was intrigued to find out what that actually means.
Give me an hour. I'll work out what that means.
So get this right. So triple resolution tech is, well, you can basically switch it from 60 to 36 to 18 megapixels.
Why?
I guess there's probably two reasons. One would be buffer size, but then the other thing would be...
Buffer size, file size, fine.
Yeah, and file size, that's it. There's one cool...
Is file size that much of a... All right, don't get me wrong, 60 odd is... That's going to be a big file.
Yeah, but, and also when it comes to editing and stuff, if you don't need it, then why would you?
Trust me, if you're buying a Leica like that, you've got a top-notch computer. You don't need to worry about processing a large file
probably
like
true.
that.
Well, I mean, I would say the only one thing that I thought was really interesting, actually, it has built-in storage. And I just can't remember for the life of me how much it was. It has several gigabytes of built-in storage. And I kind of thought, and that's basically...
Interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting because I kind of thought, wow.
Do they use that as buffer? I wonder if they use that, a hard drive a regular laptop would use your hard drive and your RAM, and it will process stuff between. As your RAM starts to get to full, it starts using your hard drive as well. And I wonder if it's doing something like that for file sizes.
It uses it.
That's interesting.
I'm pretty sure instead of a second memory card slot.
Oh.
Well, so, I'm thinking, is that going to be the next thing that we're going to see generally in in mirrorless cameras?
It better not
built-in
be.
storage.
Well, think about it now. Where's that going to go? You're going to be able to buy that camera with with 10 gigabytes of internal storage, one SD card slot, or for an extra £200,
yeah, well,
you can get
64
gig. It's Apple internal storage all over.
Well, yeah, that's it. You got it.
That's not. My initial reaction is I very much dislike that. If it starts, because it will go that way. If
well, I mean,
it's
interesting. It's interesting. It's an interesting.
Why would
thought.
they sacrifice the second slot for a bit of internal memory?
It's quite a lot of internal memory as far as I remember reading it. I just can't remember how much it is, but it's like it's substantial. So
you're getting like 128 in there. Fine.
The only thing I would say, like from a practical point of view, I mean, there's two things. First, it's easy to swap out an SD card or any kind of memory card, once that gets filled up, especially if you're shooting an event, and just pop another one in, and you're golden again. I mean, once your internal storage is full, what are you going to do then? You're going to have to basically decommission that camera for a little while, drag all the files off of it. That doesn't really make sense. So, I mean, it works in certain situations, but not in others. There's also, I remember shooting like boxing matches, for instance, where there's a printing booth. And so you'd shoot on two memory cards, and you basically shoot RAW on one and then JPEG on the other. And after each bout, or after each fight, the memory card would get swapped out and would go to the printing booth, so they start printing for people who would order prints right there and then. Mm-hmm. And so it'd be like a 3 memory card rotation system. So
you just swapping out the second card.
Yeah, second card gets swapped out after every fight. So you wouldn't be able to do that again with internal storage. Oh, that would be annoying. Unless So it's I don't know how useful that would be.
Yeah, my reaction is I don't like it or really see the point in it. However, I'm very willing to be proven wrong. I have my mind changed on that. I mean, go back to the sensor for a second.
No.
That intrigues me a little bit. Do you get better low light performance if you switch it to the lower megapixel? I bet you don't.
That's a good question. I don't know.
I bet you. How could they? Unless they start, because you're gonna have to forgive me because I will get this slightly wrong, and someone out there will correct me, I'm sure. But the was it the GH5S has dual sensors,
right?
But they were set with different ISOs, base ISOs.
Oh, okay,
right. I'm wondering if they're using 2 sensors. So you've got larger megapixels. Sorry, you've got larger photo. What's the word?
Pixels.
Yeah, if you like. But there's a word for the actual whatever. Anyway, and on one you got the smaller one, so you can get the 60 megapixels.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't really. I get the smaller file size. I get that you could shoot more frames per second if you switch it out or switch it lower. The text there for file size, megapixels.
I'm a little bit like
They're just trying to be different for the sake of it, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really get why, they have to label it triple resolution tech when really that's something that you can do on almost any consumer DSLR,
I didn't explain myself very well, but I know what I mean.
Yeah. But it also comes with an extra. It comes with an electronic viewfinder that goes into the hot shoe as an extra. Okay, but I'm saying this because the M11 already sets you back just under $9,000.
I told you, $1 billion.
And then and I'm wondering how much the extra electronic viewfinder might be.
Great.
Probably another. Well,
so you've got to take up your hot shoe to put a viewfinder on it.
Yeah. So I mean, it seems but it looks cool, man. It does look cool. Does look cool. There you go.
You can't deny the quality of Leica. You just can't.
No,
however, they're doing this stuff for the sake of it, surely.
Yeah, but I've seen some Ferraris where I thought the doors were going to fall off, and yet Well, there you go. Anyway,
I'd like to get the camera in my hands and then
for all of
pass
you,
pure actual judgment.
For all of you Leica shooters, prove me wrong. But yeah, it'd be interesting to play around with anyway.
Oh, it would. I'm sure it'll take fantastic shots, as every Leica does. But
talking about sensors, Sony's
talking about these gimmicks.
Sony's announced a new type of sensor that's apparently able to gather twice as much light as any sensor on the market today.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's interesting. What they've done is they've basically created a sensor with a double layer of transitional pixels.
Okay.
So they've literally managed to layer them on two planes. And so what that does is it allows them to essentially pick up twice as much light. And of course, what they're doing is they're increasing the dynamic range incredibly. And so therefore, they're able to reduce noise, and the low light performance of that will be greatly improved. Sounds interesting.
I'd wonder it sounds like a really good step in the right direction. Like really good.
Could be
step.
Very cool. Yeah.
Absolutely. I can't really envisage in my head how that all is going to pan out practically, as in what you actually going to see different. So it says twice as much light. Mm-hmm. What does that actually mean in real terms?
Okay, so basically means that the low light performance would be much improved. So if you're a concert shooter, if you're an event shooter, what I'm trying to get at is if you're shooting at ISO 800,
do you either now need to only shoot at ISO 400, or is there half as much noise at 800 as there was previously, just for argument's sake?
I mean, the thing is, I think the thing there is that you'll now be in
it must be the noise part, because otherwise you're gonna have to start having inbuilt NDs and stuff like that.
So the interesting thing there is that if you, as an event shooter, for example, I mean there are certain situations that are really tricky to shoot with available light, like if you think about wedding, for instance, anything that's indoors or that's like the party itself or whatever, if it's in some kind of venue, that could be difficult. You may just be able to get away without having to use, speed lights or any kind of other strobes or whatever. You might just be able to get away without that now. And that would be cool because it saves you hassle. It's great. For concert photography, this can come in really handy.
Absolutely. I can see the situations in which it could be. The idea is very, very, very useful, but I practically can't see how it's going to.
The other thing, of course,
how it's going to pan out. What are they going to do?
So the other thing, of course, from a practical point of view, is like if I think, like for instance, take a typical event or concert situation. If I have, greatly improved dynamic range, what it'll allow me also is afterwards in the raw file is to pull up more details of the shadows, for example.
Absolutely, I think this is actually all we're going to see from it. Is you will get the greater dynamic range, but actually the noise will be the same overall. However, because you've got that dynamic range, when you do pull up those shadows, that noise won't be as increased as nearly as much as it would have been previously.
So, talking about noise, actually, that's another thing that's.
Everyone, don't be afraid of noise. Noise is great. There's nothing wrong with noise.
Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it sucks. It's an interesting thing I saw, completely unrelated, but because there's also something, a little bit of news that's come out about the Nikon Z9. I've just remembered something. I saw, Nikon do their own raw file conversion software called, I think it's called Nikon NX or something, which I've tried out, and it's not bad, but there's no real need for me to use it because it doesn't really fit into my workflow, seeing that, my workflow.
What would the purpose of that software be? When would you use it?
So here's an interesting thing. So
when are you converting raw?
Well, so every time you edit it, you need to convert the raw file, right? But so what happens is whenever a new camera comes out, right, like the Z9 is relatively new, then of course Adobe have to go and figure out how to update Lightroom and Photoshop in order to make that happen, so that Lightroom can now read those files and whatever else. And
do you know how long it took to be able to tether the R6?
Well, that's a. But apparently, I read an article about where some images, some raw files from the Z9 were basically converted in Nikon's own software and then compared to Adobe Lightroom, and the difference was marked. It's marked.
Really?
It was really lacked a lot of vibrance, and there was a color shift
version.
with the Adobe version, compared to the Nikon.
That's interesting.
Software, yeah. So obviously, what's happened here is that Adobe haven't really caught up with that yet, and there's obviously still some work that needs to be done on the raw conversion there.
So it sounds like it could be incredibly useful for that first year,
possibly,
or so of the camera being out. If you're assuming you're a Lightroom user,
but it's nothing it's nothing you can't fix in Lightroom afterwards. It's just the fact that you have to fix it. It's
you want it as right as possible to begin with. It's how that camera's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But you don't know that that's what that should look like.
I mean, your Fuji files always have this issue with there's some weird weirdly shaped noise going on. That's because Fuji used a different type of sensor from just about anybody else. And so there's always been a conversion issue. And there's a thing where, a lot of people convert their Fuji raw files first in a different converter and then import them into Lightroom. And there's some other workarounds, but I've noticed that myself, and I've gotten really quite annoyed with that in the past. But I have to say, I only the other day printed a 60 by 90 centimeter print, which was a Fuji file, and that looks great in print. So you can see that in print. It looks fantastic. So it's really only something I'm sort of noticing annoyingly on the screen, but I'm not noticing that in the print. So it's
Well, there's definitely an argument to say so. Use Nikons or Canons or Fujis, whatever converter that they've got.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna end up it should end up with a file that's more accurate to what they intended the camera to produce than what Adobe are producing, at least, like I say, for that first year, possibly even longer. So
I just thought of that because there's another Nikon Z9 or Z9 update that's just been announced, and that's the first software update, which now turns the Z9 into the world's longest continuous shooter.
So those 4 people who have the camera right now.
Yeah, exactly. The 4 people who are already in possession of it can now shoot for a very long time. But get this. Remember, the Z9 is amazing in a sense because it shoots 20 frames per second. But what it can do now is it can shoot 20 frames per second in RAW plus JPEG for 15 seconds without having to buffer.
Show us how long that is.
That's how long it is.
I'm pretty sure that wasn't long enough.
That was 15 seconds.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's I would just imagine. I mean, that is pretty damn decent. 15 seconds at 20 frames per second.
I also didn't know that you were a golf sprinkler in your other job.
Well, there you go. That's it there. So that's my garden sprinkler. But yeah, interesting thing. I mean, there is, of course, as always, a slight caveat, and that's That's you gotta use the right RAW and JPEG settings for it. It's like, well, this test is based on high efficiency RAW, and the Z9 has another setting which is high efficiency RAW star, which is obviously the highest quality setting for RAW. But nevertheless, again, if you're an event shooter, if you're a sports shooter, right, or you like shooting birds in flight, whatever, then this can come up. This can come up. Come up to be really.
If you're happy with that file,
really useful. Yeah, the files apparently look amazing. So
be interested to know the difference between the three formats.
I saw a comparison.
High efficiency RAW and high efficiency RAW star. Did you say?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, I think again, unless you want to, print something the size of a building, you won't really notice the difference. I mean,
sounds about right.
It's not, it's not really something you don't necessarily really worry about. With that kind of high frame rate, I can only really think of like two situations, or very few situations, where you would actually need to really use that. One is, if you're a press or a sports shooter, it'll allow you to just have a wider selection of frames. And by the way, also the other thing that was really interesting in the report I read was that apparently the autofocus system is completely unmatched at this point. What I've read is that it's supposed to be better than what Canon's doing at the moment.
Are we sure?
Yeah, that's
it doesn't sound likely.
Yeah,
no,
but
that's great, because if they have finally sorted it out,
well, that's
good for
and
everybody.
That is exactly why I'm waiting for the Z8 to be announced, because I'm hoping that the autofocus technology will trickle down from the Z9. So that's what I'm holding out for, basically. But anyway,
it's good news. It's good news.
Yeah, I mean, Nikon is back. Back in the game.
Yeah.
Of course, what's also really interesting is to think about what Canon are going to be doing with the R1 once that drops, either in 22 or who knows, with the current, chip shortage, might be 23, who knows. But, it's definitely coming at some point.
Yeah.
And of course, they're going to be very closely looking at the Z9 to see how they can better that.
For sure.
Interesting
times.
Yeah, that's the R5S as well, which is the sort of video version. Which I think it has built-in cooling or something.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Something like that.
I think that if I remember correctly, I've taken the C70 body. It looks a bit like the C70 body. Yeah.
Okay. So I was wondering how
that was a while ago. I saw that. So that may have been.
Yeah, well, that's also, of course, we are going to be talking about that at some point on the podcast, because that's something that we're expecting for 2022, of course, too, that hasn't actually happened yet. But no, there was a mention of that a good 4 months ago, maybe.
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah. So that is pretty much all that's new at the moment.
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah. Cool. Well, if you enjoyed this episode of the Camera Shake podcast, make sure you leave us a comment, or if you're on YouTube, of course, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell thingy, whatever. Do all the things that good YouTubers usually tell you to do. And of course, as always, it'd be super interesting to hear from you wherever you are in the world. If you're listening to this show, it'd be super wicked if you could get in touch with us. We love it. So that is it.
And if you also wear double denim, let us know. I don't believe there's anyone else out there, but I would like to hear from you.
I don't know if shorts count, then it'd be triple denim. That's all I'm saying.
Denim shorts
every time. Anyway, this is literally the end of episode 91. We shall see you again next Friday. I'll see. Maybe I can bump it up with some more denim for next week.
Yeah, denim vest, denim shirt. Please tight, tiny little denim shorts.
I'm gonna get some
denim hats,
denim Converse or something.
Oh my god! Let's go.
Let's do it. See you again next Thursday.